Here was all these cheap longhorn steers overrunning Texas. And here was the rest of the country crying out for beef, and no railroads to get them out. So they trailed them out across hundreds of miles of wild country. Teddy Blue Abbott.
From the southernmost tip of Texas, cattle trails pointed north. The Shawnee, the Chisholm, the Western, the Goodnight Loving. They all led to railheads, where the cattle were loaded into freight cars bound for eastern markets. In less than 2 decades, 6 million steers and cows were herded north. So many, one trail driver said, that in places the dust was knee-deep to the cattle. The men who brought them to the railroads were given a new name, Cowboys. They were a mixed group, former Confederate cavalrymen and immigrants who had only recently learned to ride. There were Indian cowboys and African Americans, and Mexican vaqueros whose ancestors had introduced cattle to the West centuries earlier. A cowboy, one Westerner observed, is just a plain, bow-legged human who smelled very horsey at times.
In person, the cowboys were mostly medium-sized men, quick and wiry, and as a rule, very good-natured. In fact, it did not pay to be anything else. In character, their like never was or will be again. Teddy Blue Abbott.
Edward C. Abbott was born in Cranwich, England, and brought to the West by his parents as a boy. Hoping the open air would improve his frail health, his father let him help drive a herd of cattle from Texas to Nebraska when he was just 10 years old. The experience, Abbott said later, made a cowboy out of me. Nothing could have changed me after that.
My family and I went separate ways, and they stayed separate forever after. My father was all for farming, and all my brothers turned out farmers except one. And he ended up the worst of the lot, a sheep man and a Republican.
The cowboys' average age was 24. They were paid so badly and worked so hard that 2/3 of them made only one trail drive before finding something better to do. They owned their saddle, but not the horse they rode, and they rode it day and night.
For a man to be stove up at 30 may sound strange to some people, but many a cowboy has been so bunged up that he's had to quit riding that early in life. My advice to any young man or boy is to stay at home and not be a rambler, as it won't buy you anything. James Emmett McCauley.
If a storm come and the cattle started running, you'd hear that low rumbling noise along the ground. Then you jump for your horse and get out there in the lead, trying to head them and get them into a mill before they scattered to hell and gone. It was riding at a dead run in the dark with cut banks and prairie dog holes all around you, not knowing if the next jump would land you in a shallow grave.
I ride an old paint and I lead an old Dan. I'm going to Montana to throw the hula hand.
The singing was supposed to soothe the cattle, and it did. The 2 men on guard would circle around with their horses on a walk, if it was a clear night and the cattle was bedded down and quiet, and one man would sing a verse of a song, and his partner on the other side of the herd would sing another verse. And you'd go through a whole song that way. I had a crackerjack of a partner in '79. I'd sing and he'd answer, and we'd keep it up like that for 2 hours. But he was killed by lightning.
After up to 4 straight months in the saddle, often in the same clothes every day, eating every meal at the chuck wagon, drinking nothing but coffee and water, the cowboy's job was finally done. He was paid for his work and turned loose in town.
Now come along, boys, and listen to my tale, and I'll tell you of my troubles on the Chisholm Trail. Come-a-tie-yi-yippee-yippee-yi-yippee-yi, come-a-tie-yi-yippee-yippee-yi. I started up the trail October 23rd, left Gold, Texas with the two you heard. Come-a-tie-yi-yippee-yippee-yi-yippee-yi, come-a-tie-yi-yippee-yippee-yi.
I bought some new clothes and got my picture taken. I had a new white Stetson hat that I paid $10 for, and new pants that cost $12, and a good shirt and fancy boots. Lord, I was proud of those clothes. When my sister saw me, she said, "Take your pants out of your boots and put your coat on. You look like an outlaw." I told her to go to hell, and I never did like her after that.
Cowboys were big spenders. But while businesses profited, all the cowtowns soon became wilder than their permanent residents liked.
Abilene Chronicle. The marshal has posted up printed notices informing all persons that the ordinance against carrying firearms or other weapons in Abilene will be enforced. That's right. There's no bravery in carrying revolvers in a civilized community.
Gun control ordinances were common. Cowboys who insisted on carrying their six-shooters in town risked fines and imprisonment. To make sure the laws were obeyed, some cowtowns resorted to hiring notorious gunmen, Wyatt Earp, Bat Masterson, and Wild Bill Hickok, to keep the peace.
Morally, as a class, cowboys are foul-mouthed, blasphemous, drunken, lecherous, utterly corrupt. Usually harmless in the plains when sober, they are dreaded in the towns, for then liquor has an ascendancy over them. Cheyenne Daily Leader.
One by one, the cowtowns would declare themselves off-limits to the Texas herds and the cowboys who came with them.
Then I went home. After I got home, my father said to me one night, "You can take old Morgan and plow the West Ridge tomorrow." Like hell I'd plow the West Ridge. And when my father woke up next morning, Teddy was gone.